All right, welcome, Buff fans. We're continuing our opponent preview series with Stephen Johnson, who covers TCU for the Fort Worth Star Telegram. And Stephen, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hey man, I appreciate the invite. Anytime.
Well, you and I were just talking that we were at Media Day last week in Frisco. You made that long drive all the way from Fort Worth, and um, I forgot that I didn't put it together that it was you because I hadn't met you in person. But yeah, you asked Coach Prime the question. He kind of got on that Fort Worth Star Telegram used to get on me, and your response was hilarious. Like, hey man, I just got here.
We just have
That's
to
pretty
stay
funny.
ready, man. He was I don't want to say he was sniping at people, but I figured he might have some type of comment, so I figured I might as well just stay ready just in case.
Yeah, he's got that love hate relationship with the media where he's been, but yeah. Obviously, we're going to talk about the TCU Horned Frogs, who, Colorado had never faced until 2022, and now this will be the third time in 4 years, and this is your fourth year, covering TCU. So it just seems normal, I guess, for you to have Colorado on the schedule, but that was never the case before 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. My first game on the beat was when TCU played in Boulder 2022, which
Mhm.
was that was my first time in Denver. I mean, not Denver, but Colorado, Denver area in general. Beautiful landscape as well. Just to see how far that program went, because the Buffs were really that was one of the worst things I probably covered in person. And
Yeah.
then seeing what they did when they came to Fort Worth in 23 and then what they did last year, I think I don't know if Dion gets enough credit for how rapidly this program has ascended in just a short amount of time.
Well, yeah, you're right. And the funny thing is that that game that you covered in Boulder, that wasn't even their worst game.
Oh wow.
If you remember right, I think TC was only ahead by three at half,
It was
something
it
like
was a
that.
very. I think they needed like a punt return. I think it might have been
Yes.
on the 7-6, and then they kind of just rolled away with it. And honestly, that game, they were starting Chandler Morris, if I remember.
Hmm.
Colorado, in a kind of weird way, maybe opened the door for TCU to make the national championship
Yep.
run because Max Duggan came in, never let the job go after that.
Yeah, that's right. Chandler Morris, he looked okay, but then got hurt, and it was Max Duggan from there on out. So,
Mm.
yeah. So you've obviously seen some good football, really kind of ups and downs in your time there. But my perception from the outside is that Sonny Dykes is the right coach for this job, and he's got them rolling. And outside of I know 23, was only 5-7, but there was three. Like field goal losses, including the one against Colorado. So they were still right there. Do you feel like Sonny Dykes has got this program to where they're kind of roll? I don't know if rolling is the right word, but I mean they're on the winning track.
I would say this year will probably be the biggest deciding factor in what
Mhm.
direction he's taking them in. Because as you said, it's like first year was amazing, second year was kind of, and then last year, even though they won 9 games, I think there was still a little bit of from a feeling from a fan base that hey, maybe we didn't capitalize on this schedule. They were a game or two away from being able to play in Arlington.
So yeah, I mean last year 9-4, but you said, I mean they felt like they left some games on the table, right?
Mhm. Yeah, they got upset by UCF. I think they were leading by 3 possessions in that game. I still don't really understand how they blew that game. They got upset by Houston, and that was a game that I think many people started wondering about maybe his even job security. And then you had the Baylor game. That was a great game actually, but Savion Williams had a drop touchdown catch, and they ended up losing that game 34-31. So they were a player or two away from. We're talking about maybe being 10-2, 11-1, making it to Arlington. So that's why I think the expectations are so high coming into this season where I do think they think it would be a failure. At the very least, if they're not going into that last game, those last couple games, and they're not still in the mix, I think that would be a failure of a season for TCU.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously they've got a lot of people to replace from last year. But when you return your quarterback, and he was a good one. I mean, Josh Hoover had a really good year last year. Colorado Shador Sanders was the only one in the conference that threw for more yards last year. Talk about Hoover and kind of what kind of leader he is, and just the type of quarterback he is. I mean, you had Max Duggan there. Chandler had some good moments, but how does Josh Hoover compare?
I think Josh is probably the best pure thrower out of all the guys who he's named, just in terms of arm strength, his kind of willingness to kind of push the ball down the field. The thing I think last year was kind of just seeing his evolution from he came in as a gunslinger and he had to learn how to be a game manager last year. So if you look, TCU was 3-3 or something around there to start that, and it was large part because he was just turning the ball over so much. The back half, maybe his yards per game numbers went down a little bit, but you saw him have more control, more command over the offense, and that's why TCU won. I think 6 or 7 to kind of close the year. So I think he's a guy. He has the arm strength. He's not the most athletic guy, and I think that's why he's maybe not in those same national conversations with a lot of guys. Because look, man, any other time you have a quarterback that threw for nearly 4,000 yards in the Power Four conference returning, that's a guy that will be like on a lot of Heisman watch lists, All American watch lists, but he's not as athletic as say an Arch Manning or a DJ Lagway. But he's not a
Yeah.
statue. He's not Drew Allen, for example. He can still move. I would call him a functional scrambler. They're not going to use him in a lot of read option, but this is a guy that can score you a touchdown in the red zone. So I think he's either going to be one of the top 3 or top 4 quarterbacks in the Big 12. And I think he's kind of like the face of the program right now. And he'll give them a chance to win every single game they're in.
Well, and I imagine that fans love him because the reports were that he was offered quite a bit of money to go to Tennessee in the offseason, and he turned it down. He was like, no, I love TCU. I love Fort Worth.
Yeah, absolutely. He was offered at least $1 million more to go to Tennessee, but I think, like you said, he's kind of from this area, from Rockwall, which is maybe about an hour or so from Fort Worth.
Mhm.
He's already kind of ingrained in this system. I think this will be now his 3rd year working with Kendall Browse. He knows the offense. He knows the community. And I just think having to go, because he would have had to go and join Tennessee basically right now, try to
Yeah.
learn. I know the offenses are similar. He would have tried to had to learn a new offensive scheme. And obviously, this would be a jump up in competition. So I think it's a good decision for Josh. Like I said, I think he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. And that obviously, he was already a fan favorite just for the way he carries himself around the program, just around the community. But once that kind of story broke and we were one of the first people to break it, I think that just, his stock just went all the way up with the fan base.
Yeah. As far as his weapons, I know several of the top receivers from last year are gone, but there's some good ones back. TCU's always got good receivers. They went in the portal and got a couple of guys as well. Talk about the weapons that he's got around him.
Well, Eric McAllister's preseason All Big 12. He was a guy, he was technically 4th in the rotation last year behind 3 guys that are on NFL rosters, but this is still a guy that had 40 catches, almost 800 yards, averaged nearly 20 yards a reception. Boise State transfer also had 800 yards, I think, his last year at Boise State in just 8 or 9 games. So he's super productive, 6'3, 6'4. He's a guy that can make plays after the catch. He's not as dynamic athletically as, say, a Savion Williams, but I think he's just much more polished as a route runner and just a catcher of the football. So I think this could easily be a guy that has over 1,000 yards receiving. And how they built around him is they got Jordan Dwyer from Idaho out the portal, another 1,000+ yards receiver, FCS level. But during the spring, man, I would probably say it was McAllister and then maybe Jordan is like the second best wide receiver. So he's a guy I think is going to make an impact. And another guy they brought in was Joseph Manjack from Houston. They're hoping he can be the Jack Bech of last year. It's a little bit bigger than Jack, doesn't wear any gloves. It just kind of blows my mind seeing him out there on the field. But he's a veteran receiver. He's a guy that I think could easily just get 500 yards. It's probably one of those guys that's always going to find a way to get open. I think what's going to decide how special that receiver room is guys like Major Everhart, Jordan Bailey, some of those younger guys that have a little bit more explosiveness that can take the top off the defense. But are they ready yet for bigger roles? Have they refined themselves as route runners and not just being necessarily just gadget guys you just give to like jet sweeps and screens and whatnot?
Yeah. And obviously, you said Josh threw for almost 4,000 yards last year. It sounds like he's going to have a good year in that regard this year, but they didn't run the ball very well last year. And, their top rusher, he didn't have a ton of yards, but he moved on. What do they got in the backfield this year?
Well, Savion really saved the season last year. They had to move a 6'5" wide receiver, basically put him at running back / wildcat quarterback. They don't really have a guy on the roster that I think could really do that. Like Savion was getting maybe 10, 15 carries a game at the end of the year. I don't know if they have that player on the roster. So they need a guy like Jeremy Payne or Nate Palmer. 2 guys, I believe these are second-year players off the top of my head. I really like both of them. Both of
Mhm.
them, they're not the biggest players, but they run hard. They have explosiveness, and they give them an upside of having that running back number 1. So I think it was a combination of a lack of experience at the running back room last year and the offensive line. They were missing a guy named Cade Bennett,
Mhm.
San Diego State transfer, 2-time All Mountain West Conference. He was expected to kind of be like the rock in the middle, but he had a season-ending injury. So now he's back. So I think they're hoping with his return, some kind of natural development on the O-line, and if one of those young guys can pop, obviously they had one of the worst rushing attacks in the country in the conference last year. So there's nowhere to go but up. But if
Yeah.
they keep that to how they run the ball in 2022, I think that can kind of bode well to their chances of making it to Arlington.
All right, and switching over to defense, the trenches were the problem last year on that side. I mean, they were good defensively, really good down the stretch. But I know, I saw Sonny. He had availability with you guys a few weeks ago, and he was saying, "Look, everybody knows that was our problem. Was up in the trenches last year. Are they better in that regard? Do you think they're going to be better against the run?"
I think they're going to be a lot deeper. I remember like the end of the season, man, they were putting defensive ends at D tackles and things like that. So they've kind of loaded up. You know, they lost Dominic Williams to Oklahoma last year, and that kind of really set the roster back because he was the best run stopper on the roster. So I think they kind of reloaded. They brought in Ansel Din Maba. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, from Washington State. He was the their leading pass rush. He's also a pretty good run stopper. They're expecting to have Paul Oyewale back he missed, I think, the entirety of last season. He's
Hmm.
another good defensive end, about 260, 270, that's really strong against the run. So they just have more bodies now. Some of these younger guys, like a Marcus Dill, who wasn't really playing early in the season, he's a guy that I think has tremendous upside. Maybe not all conference this year, but it could easily see him being the all conference guy type player next year. So they have a lot more bodies, and I think it also helps that I think they have a really strong linebacker core behind them as well.
Yeah, on that defense, I had a chance to chat with Bud Clark last week in Frisco. Really nice young man. Enjoyed talking to him, but he's kind of the leader of that secondary, right? And
Mhm.
feels like they're pretty good on that back end.
Yeah, absolutely. If Josh is the face of the program on offense, Bud is the face of the program
Hmm.
on defense. He was the guy that had that pick six that kind of started everything in the Fiesta Bowl a couple years ago against Michigan. Was a guy that easily could have went to the NFL. I think could have maybe been a day two, day three pick, but thanks to rev share NIL, he comes back to TCU, can develop for another year, and he had the best season of his career last year.
Yeah.
Pro Football Focus graded him as a top five safety in the country. Preseason All Big 12, second team All Big 12 last year. So I think he's coming off the best season of his career. This new scheme with Andy Avalos really kind of fits his profile as both a playmaker against the run and in the secondary. So he leads. They think they're really deep in the secondary, especially at cornerback, because are also getting guys back, Avery Helm and Vernon Glover, two cornerbacks that missed all of last season. So I think this would be the deepest secondary that Sonny Dice has ever had.
Okay. And just overall team, I mean, you pretty much talked about it already, but I mean, high expectations for this team, right? I mean, there is no preseason media poll, I guess, in the Big 12, but if there was one, I would imagine TCU would be in that mix that people would have them, one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the conference, right?
Yeah, I would say just talking to the guys at the at media day, I probably would see TCU landing somewhere like 4 or 5. It seems like
Yeah.
Kansas State, Arizona State, Tech, Baylor, and TCU are kind of all Utah as well.
Iowa State, I don't know if you mentioned them.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
those six teams are probably, I think, the ones that I think a lot of people are considering the favorites. And you obviously can't throw out Iowa State, but you've been doing this. You've been watching the Big 12 just
Yeah.
as much as I've had. There's probably going to be a team, Colorado, Arizona, that we don't think is going to be that great this year. It
Right.
might just be a 6-6 team, and they'll be 8-win, 9-win team, kind of contending for a Big 12 title spot. So I think the biggest question with TCU is, can they run the ball? And that schedule is brutal. That schedule is brutal at Arizona State, at Kansas State. You got Iowa State, Colorado. A lot of these places that they kind of struggle to win in historically, they're going to have to win in this year if they want to make it to the AT&T for the Big 12 title game.
Yeah, at least in the preseason it looks brutal. I remember last year, Colorado's schedule looked brutal because they
Mm.
had all the top 5 teams and none of them wound up being very good,
I
other than
think TCU
Kansas
is the
State.
same said last year. Like
Yeah.
they got to play Utah, they got to play Arizona.
Yeah.
Those teams weren't any good last
Yeah.
year. So
Yeah.
maybe it's easy. I don't know. That's
Right.
that's the beauty of the Big 12. You just really never know year to year.
Yeah, you really don't know anything what's going on in the Big 12. But one interesting note about this Colorado game down at TCU, Colorado's putting in artificial, or they put in artificial turf this summer. So the game at TCU will be Colorado's only game on grass.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
that'll be kind of interesting. I don't know if that'll impact anything for Colorado, but they practice on turf a lot of times in the indoor facility, and they'll be playing on turf. So I don't know if that's a factor at all, but just one little note for you is that's the only one on grass.
I appreciate it. They like TCU has a lot of pride in like its grounds crew. So at the very
Yeah.
least, the grass will be top notch. So hopefully it's not too big of a difference to impact the game for Colorado.
Yeah, and I know in talking to Bud Clark last week, we were talking about that 22 game, no, the 2023 game, and he goes, we kind of owe them a little something from that game last year because I know Colorado, kind of snuck up on them a little bit. That was the first game of the Coach Prime era, and nobody expected Colorado to be what they were doing that day in Fort Worth. But it'll be a fun game, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be curious to see once we finally start talking as we get closer to the game, how much revenge, redemption, whatever word they want to use. You know how these, when they get
Yeah.
media trained up, it's just going to be any other game. But I think TCU was embarrassed by that game, man. It was a national game, one of the most watched games of the
Mhm.
season. You're coming off the high of that national championship appearance, and then just to lose in that fashion with the defense looking how it looked. I think that was a big reason they let Joe Gillespie go at the end of the season, just because the lasting image of Shador Sanders, and we know Colorado didn't have the best O line that year.
Yeah.
The image of Shador having all this time to just find Travis down the field. I think that stuck with TCU for that entire season. So I know there'll be lot different faces, a lot of different players from Colorado and TCU as well. But if I'm TCU, I think they should still be highly motivated by what happened a couple years ago.
Yeah, that was the Dylan Edwards game for Colorado as well,
Absolutely.
who's now at Kansas State. So, Buff fans, there's probably a lot of them that were down there a couple years ago. But before we get out of here, just let Buff fans know if anybody's coming down there this year, any place they need to see, any food recommendation you got, something that Buff fans need to do while they're in Fort Worth.
Well, I think you got to go to the stockyards if especially if you're here for a weekend, make it a weekend trip. Stockyards, Sundown Square, excuse me. All those have kind of great restaurants, great brunch spots, kind of great places if you want to go. Bars, stockyards. I think it's just seeing all the cattle. They might do the cattle walk. That might be Sunday, so I don't know if fans will still be here. But I just think that general area, and honestly, right by TCU, if you want to kind of get that college feel, even though Fort Worth's a big city, there's kind of this row on University Avenue, like Dutch's Burgers, Buffalo Bros, kind of these college area bars that are going to be filled, have all the games on. So I would either go Stockyard, Sundown Square, or honestly just right outside the stadium, kind of on University, kind of just soak in all the environment with the TCU fans that I'm
Yeah,
sure will be there after the game.
awesome. I do have to ask you one last question because you're from Memphis.
Mhm.
What barbecue is better, Memphis or Dallas barbecue?
Honestly, people around here have been furious with me because I have still not had any official barbecue from down here. I'm more of a
Okay.
homemade barbecue guy. So like when my dad makes ribs,
Hmm.
I don't think anybody makes better ribs than him. But I haven't.
Yeah.
I got to make the trip. At some point, I'm gonna go this summer and give my official review. But I will tell you this: Memphis does chicken wings better than barbecue. A lot of people don't know that. So I
Okay.
don't think there's any place in the country that does chicken wings better than us.
Awesome. Good to know for any Buff fans. They're going to make a random trip to Memphis at some point. So thanks,
Absolutely.
Stephen. I appreciate it. We'll see you down in Fort Worth later this year.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.